yet God has looked at them and said, this is a person who is worthy of love, and challenged us to love them.
You know, our neighborhood up there in Whispering Oaks, we're just off of East Calvin. We're going to meet again on one person's got a big driveway this coming Sunday again. And it's amazing how we all kind of like each other. And some of us know that our political views are just, I mean, on opposite ends, and who cares? It doesn't matter. So it's again this, we're close, but the idea is like the political thing is actually farther away.
Right.
You know, it goes back to, you know, you get to know each other, and we don't hide the fact either. We don't have to hide the fact. We don't have to. Nobody's trying to convince anybody of anything, I think.
That's wonderful.
It used to be when, I can remember when I was younger, it was like, why do you think that? And now, whenever I hear somebody something that I don't understand is so diametrically opposed, the first thing that pops into my head is, gee, how did they get there? Rather than, where are they?
But you also might ask the question, how did I get where I am? And look at that in retrospect.
I think it's important, like in my neighborhood, I'm a newbie. The people that are my neighbors have lived there for generations, literally for generations. There's the site of an old cabin on our property where one of their ancestors had lived generations ago. But they are the kindest, most giving and caring people. And I know their political views are very different from mine. But I don't know. I mean, I care, but it doesn't mean a thing to me as far as how I feel about them. You know, I can separate that from those people, you know, them. And sometimes I can't because I have more trouble with it if I don't know the people, and they can be obnoxious. You know, like the guy with the big truck that drives through the parking lot with all of his flags flying and stuff, and you know, but what stops us from trying to get to know that person? You know,
That guy who drives around, we've all seen him. Why do you think he does that?
of course I know why he does that.
I don't.
Really?
Well,
Okay.
my thought is
I mean,
he's
he's
trying to
clearly
say,
making a statement.
I matter.
Yeah.
All he's saying is, I matter. I don't see the world thinking that I matter, but I do matter. All these, you know, these uncomfortableness that happens in the world is because somebody feels like they're marginalized. It's like
He's threatened. He feels threatened. Something by the current.
yeah, that could, well, threaten means there's fear,
Right.
but you know, some people, so you really don't know, but the one thing that if he has to show, it's like nobody notices it, or her, whatever. We all need to be noticed. That's, you know, that's part of the whole idea of gathering once a week in community.
It's a way of saying there's more than one of us who feel this way too, and helping other people get on board his side.
His desire to do that just astounds me. I can't. To me, I feel like he feels very threatened. That his identity is really at risk here, and that he really needs. He's overcompensating for he has to make a big display, of I'm here, I matter. And I don't want this status quo to change. So, yeah,
Which this is veering off, so I was gonna let it finish out, but
there.
there, with the us and the others, right? And I will admit, there's like an area where I get hesitant about joining the us and others, and it's people who don't support women in ministry. And that's very prominent around here. I left my childhood church that I had been at since I was 7 because the pastor told me that if he knew I was preaching, he wouldn't let me in his pulpit. And the moment I hear someone doesn't support women in ministry, I shrink back a little. Because it automatically puts me at, oh, you don't like me. Because that's the very core of who I am. I'm called to be a minister. I'm called to share God's love. I don't think that my sex or my gender or anything under the umbrella of anywhere matters except for my love of God and my love of community. And so it can be hard to like display love and show love to people who don't even accept my love and God's love through me because I am a woman.
But do you stop loving them because they don't love you?
No, but there's this hesitation.
Yes, I understand that, but it's the unloved are the hardest to love sometimes. The people who don't want to be loved and don't love themselves. They're the ones to me that cry out the most that they need love and they need to be cared for. And like John said, they need to be noticed and they need to be included. I think that's a lot of time why people are so aggressive, and because they don't, like John said, they don't feel included, they don't feel a part of.
And we insulate ourselves against them, or from them, maybe not against, but from them, because we don't like to be in that area where we are likely to have our belief system questioned or rejected by their behavior.
Especially when it's a personal rejection. It's like, how do you love a racist? How do you love a sexist? You know, I mean, these things are very challenging. And families are being split up over it.
I used to, which I mean, there are a lot of people, their opinion has changed, but there are some people in my life that I thought if I got into, you know, if I got to preach at the right churches or if I rubbed the right hands, they would see this respect in me. And then it was 2 years ago, I have a relative, and I don't, you know, want to air out all the dirty laundry, but he's 19, and he felt this call to preach, and he's gotten to go to all these, and he's Baptist, so obviously they were just like, let's open you up a church. He's gotten to do all these revivals and all these services, and my family does decoration. I don't know if y'all know what that is. You go up to the graveyard. It's basically a family church service. Your whole family gets together on your family graveyard. You have a church service and a meal. And a couple of years ago, I got to preach because the pastor who was supposed to come got COVID. And it was a last minute, like they had 45 minutes and no one there. And they really loved it. And then because he got a call to preach, I got butted out next year. And they didn't even tell me. And that was hard. And I feel like I have to have a bit of a buffer between me and that side of my family, just because the rejection felt really deep.
It's hurtful.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is really important. There's a difference between failing to love someone and acknowledging you're angry with them. That what they have done, I mean, Jesus was very angry a number of times. Very.
With his disciples often. With his disciples.
with his disciples, and also especially with those who excluded others. He demonstrated that his love for them, but that's not the same as accepting their viewpoint of him or their understanding of life. And I think especially us Southerners tend to confuse love for Southern nice.
There's no hate like Southern nice.
Huh?
No, just
I got that.
bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
It's love is not being sweet.
Well, how many of us have used the phrase, I love you, but I don't like you right now?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's,
but you
Bless
may
your heart.
even yeah, you may even like them, but you are really either really angry at them or really strongly disagree about something that really matters. What you're talking about, something that really matters. I think that's one place that Martin Luther King Jr. helped me. I never knew Martin Luther King, but I learned a lot from him. That it is the opposite of love to accept and allow the other person to allow yourself to imbibe the other person's negative understanding of you. And he talked about freeing the racist was part of his mission. I really think that distinction is very important to me. Love versus accepting or keeping silent or kowtowing or whatever words you want to use.
Is keeping silent loving?
For me, it's the opposite of love. Because I am letting my fear of you trump my love for you.
I'm laughing at your choice of words.
Well, I was not intentionally doing that, but it just, yeah,
Keeping silent is a way of walling off.
yeah.
That's what's wrong with it. You're protected, but until what's assailing the wall becomes too great and the wall comes crumbling down, that's what the ultimate, it maintains your safety for right now, but the ultimate end is if you keep walling stuff out, that the wall's got to come down sooner or later, not just on a
I could say
personal level, but
something.
on a societal level.
I can say something about that that's kind of along the same lines as Sasha's. I'm sorry. The daisy. I'm sorry. Don't ignore me. I have a funny tongue. Yeah, having been a woman in a profession most of my life, there've been numerous times, that I was discriminated against because I was female. And one of the things that I had to learn, since I had been brought up as a Southern young woman, not to make myself heard, to be silent, that I had a hard time learning the difference between aggression and assertiveness. So you can be assertive without being aggressive. It's not easy, but sometimes you need to be aggressive. But the thing is you have to get past that wall in order. I think in some ways it helps the person that you're dealing with, or persons, Sure. to learn to deal with other people. And regardless of their sex or color or whatever, because you're doing, in a way, you're doing them a disservice by not, putting them in.
Right. And perhaps realizing that a different point of view, or whatever, like Wiley said, does not threaten you. This is not your opinion of who I am and what I should be is your opinion. It's, my opinion comes from a different place. Who I am comes from a different place. My call to the ministry is no less than yours. It is valuable in internalizing your own merit and being less threatened by an opposing view. And just that person is, and that's really hard. It is, I can say it all day. That can take lifetimes to do because we're programmed to seek approval from others. And especially if you're a woman. And I'm not sure we're granted the privilege of assertiveness. We always come across as bitchy, no matter how assertive we are. And but we've got to centralize ourselves in God and our own beliefs and have faith in them. And then I'm less blown about by differing opinions. And then I can love you like I'm supposed to. Because you're less of a threat to me.
So that's the value of the group. And the group gives you the strength and hopefully the discipline to move forward rather than backward. And you have to be careful about what groups you ascribe to.
And yet, people with different opinions in different groups.
There should be room in the group for different opinions, but a group has to have a mission, don't you think?
Yeah, but I learn from those groups sometimes that what I need to do or what needs to happen if we don't agree on some basic things.
But there has to be something that unites the group.
Sure.
And your belief in that group or your trust in that group is very important to maintaining it, but also important to the decisions that you make or are forced to make. I read a book about Martin Luther King, and the title of the book was You've Got to Be Willing to Die Before You Can Begin to Live. Now, if I had been at that time and in that place, would I have had the courage? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe, but not probably not. So it made me think a lot about the trouble that Black people have had in our society and the courage that it took for them to assert that independence from the stereotypes that have been laid upon them.
Scary. It's been interesting to me to see the power of the Black women in politics and how they are stepping up and making themselves heard. I think that's a really,
It really is. And are you
amazing
more
thing.
inclined to trust a Black woman or a Black man?
me personally, I don't know. It just depends on the situation.
And there was one thing in this book that bothered me, and I don't know whether it was portrayed accurately or not, but it was said that in Birmingham, they had to make the decision to use the children, which was, for me, a big step to put your children out there to fill up the jails so that the white people had to take notice. Because most of us do have a soft spot for children everywhere.
You just made me acutely aware of something. I have known a lot of Black women, know a lot of Black women. I don't know that I really know Black men. I was in public places with them and dealt with them, but I didn't know them. Are Black men more reticent to talk than women, or is that just my experience?
I know when I was working for DSS and Marshall, one day they had a guy came down from Asheville wanted to look around Madison County, and they had me. I was outreach, and so they had me take him in my car to some places around Madison County, and I kept thinking, oh gosh, what's people gonna think when they see that Black man in my car?
Yeah.
You know, because I was, at that time, I was separated from my husband, and I thought, people are gonna think I'm dating this Black guy now, you know, or something like that, but it was just, you know, it was just strange. I mean, he was very nice, didn't have any issues with him at all, but, you know, it was just strange having him in my car.
Good program.
Yeah. Because I had never been around very many Black people, because we just didn't have them. In Madison County, you just didn't have any Black people.
How often have we thought, I'm not gonna do that because of what other people think? And that to me puts up another wall, another barrier too.
Yeah.
You know, because he was a nice man. You
Yeah.
could have gotten to know him a little bit better had he not been Black, right?
Yeah.
And I know there was a gentleman that I worked with at St. Jude who worked in the morgue. What a horrible place to have to work in a children's hospital. But he was in the morgue. And
It's actually very peaceful.
Nobody talks back to you.
Yeah.
There's no emergencies in the morgue.
Right, but dealing with the families
Right.
was what was the hardest part. But, to me, but he was the kindest, most gentle man, and after my husband died, he was one of the people who came to me and let me know that if I needed anything, he was there for me. And he had suggested that he worked with homeless men. And he had suggested that if I would care to do this, that any of my husband's clothes that I wanted to donate, he would make sure that they were, used to help other people. That just broke my heart, it just was such a kind act of him to take something that was such a hard thing to do for me and let me know that he could make it a beneficial thing, to make it a really good thing, and he did. But you also have to open yourself up to, and that's sometimes very hard. I mean, he was a nice person. I liked him a lot. But there have been other black men that I probably wouldn't have let in the door, I wouldn't have wanted to talk to them because of the way they appeared, just appearances.
Right. But God looks at that man as righteous and worthy. We're all the same in God's eyes. And I think during some of my reflections this week, that was a powerful starting point for me to start thinking about loving people the way God wants us to. And the fact is, we're all worthy. No matter what we've done, what we say, what a threat we are to another person, that person is holy and worthy. God has made them that way. So whatever I think about them, only is in terms of me, just me. Because that person is worthy. Who am I to say otherwise? And that might be the starting point for empathy for people you don't. And I'm just throwing that out there, spitballing that idea. For people you don't have interactions with every day, or who you can't get to know, but whose political beliefs, whose actions, whose whatever addictions, whatever, do come to you as a threat. God has said that is a worthy individual. So I think it's just amazing that the early church opened themselves up to the Romans.
To what?
The Romans. It just blows my mind that they were willing, essentially Jews were willing to sit next to the pews with Romans. I mean, Cornelius, imagine what the first convert, imagine what it must have been like for him to come into that Christian church as a former oppressor of these people, and they welcomed him. If they can do that, if the Jews can let a Roman centurion in their church, I can be a better person. That's all I can say.
You could equate that to a white person going in a black church.
Yeah,
Way,
I mean, I can let a Trumper sit next to me in church. Please come. Yeah.
Well, and also following that the earliest church, I didn't call it that, but church, was composed entirely of Jews, that they reached out to Gentiles.
Gentiles.
Romans is one thing, they were Gentiles too, but these people they viewed as trash
Unclean.
Unclean.
and unclean. Last I checked my genealogy, that was me. That was my family that they reached out to.
And they had big fights. I mean, there was evidently a huge deal about circumcision. And because that's a huge part of the Jewish identity. And they said, come to the church anyway.
If you're interested in pursuing that further, there's a Frontline series. I think it's starting tonight at midnight on PBS. The early Christian church and its whole history and all that. I think they're about 4 hours of it. I think I've seen it back in the past, but I thought I might record it. I think it's really
Yeah,
well
I
done.
think I'm going to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's been moving me a lot. Anyway. That God can be a powerful source for not only loving your neighbor, but loving your enemy. And I will admit, it was easier back in the day that I think to show how you loved someone because you could just feed them and bring them into your house. But not many people, which is still true, but Donald Trump doesn't need to be fed and he doesn't need a home. I do think he needs some love, but how do you show that person? How do you fill your heart with love for them and his followers or the racists? It's tough stuff.
And what about yourself? Learning to love yourself.
That's hard.
It seems to me that that's a powerful thing. Julie's distant cousin was writing to her son who was going into World War II in the British Army.
I got a book.
She ends a book of what amounts to a book of letters to him as he was preparing to go. This is the postscript. And it was sent to one of my friend's son by my friend when he was in the internment camp for conscientious objectors in World War II. With the censor's approved stamp is on the inside of this book. Department of Justice, Federal Reformatory Censor number 2. But this is what she says to her son. I'm going to paraphrase this slightly because that was a time when they used mail for everybody, and I don't like to do that. War begins first in the human soul. When we have learned how to wrest honor from humiliation, our mastery of our own soul has begun. And by just that much, we have brought the war against war nearer to victory. We no longer look to those on the heights to supply us with the evidence that God exists. Instead, we ourselves, from the depths, become part of that evidence. We have proved that power itself is powerless against the authority of love. That you and I will leave some such evidence behind us is the perpetual hope, she says, of your mother. That is one of the, I have memorized that passage. It means so much in freeing me from the fear of shame and humiliation.
Can I say something? You know, what you're saying there. Have you ever seen something in the media or something, and you see somebody doing something, or even in your everyday life, and you get this terrible embarrassment for them,
Yeah.
and they don't, you can't. I just thought I'd bring that up. I don't even know how to react about that, and I just feel I'm so connected with that person that I don't even know them. But what I've done is they're a reflection of me if I was in that situation. So in effect, though I'm separate from them, I am connecting with them at the same time.
Yeah.
And you know, recognizing the value that God has in you and the value of yourself. I mean, that's so hard to do. But if you can do that, that will eliminate so much of the fear. Because you're less movable. You're stable in God, you're stable in yourself. And everything will be all right. But I remember in one of her sermons, Lisa was talking about how Christ was yoked with us to help us with our burden. And the first thought in my head was, poor Christ, to be yoked to me. And did anybody else feel that way, or just unworthy and just not? But we are. That's what God says. Who are we to disagree? Think about that this week. Look in the mirror and say, that is a worthy person, worthy of God's love and other people's love. Fight that fear, because we all are. Even if we don't want Christ yoked to us. Poor Christ, God bless him. I am not an easy person to be yoked to. Any questions? Anything else you want to bring up? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
That was a good start. Don't you think?
Sure we can.
That's my one.
Yeah. Okay,
That's about it.
Yeah, I just got my copy yesterday, so I haven't had time to read
Yeah,
it
they're
yet.
coming
Oh
in.
my.
Yeah.
Well,
But that's my side.
literally, the last page is the most important.
Yeah.
And they quote from the Bible because
It's an epilogue.
When
It's
I
a book.
had that picture.
they are less.
Most